Greetings, wine class. As we are here at the end of the semester, we've got just one more lecture on Tuesday, and then the exams are on Thursday. That's reading day. At 2 p.m. we'll have the wine labels visual exam. At 3 p.m. we'll have the wine final exam, a paper copy, multiple choice matching type of affair. A bunch of people have been asking me about some sort of study guide for the label exam. I've never really done one before. I'm not really sure how I'll do it right now, but I figured I would do it in a video format because there's a bunch of stuff to cover, and I'm not going to sit down and write out all the pages and pages of stuff. But also, to be fair to you, we actually haven't gotten through a whole lot of the wine regions, particularly of Europe. We focus mostly in on France because it's the biggest and most complicated, and it's the model for everything else. So I'm not going to review all of the stuff I did in class. That's why we had class lecture. Hopefully you took class notes. But this is my attempt for a 10 or 15 minute kind of general overview of stuff that you might see on the wine label exam. Not all inclusive. I'm going to hit highlights. Some stuff we haven't even talked about in class. So do pay attention and do take notes even on this. So, for starters, like I said, we've already lectured about France in class ad nauseum. What, 4 or 5 different lectures we dedicated to understanding French regions and French varietals. And so I'm not going to review it all in detail here. If you skipped all those classes, good luck! You can try to go get some notes from somebody else why they would give them to you. I don't know, but maybe they will be nice to you. Just to review, so you know exactly the type of thing that I usually ask, or you will see labels. We talked about the main regions of the French wine, big regions that are AOCs in and of themselves. We talked about this. Places like Loire, Champagne, Alsace, Burgundy, Bordeaux, Rhone. We also talked about several sub-regions of those main regions. So, yes, indeed, you might see a poulet fumé versus a poulet faussé on the on the label exam. And only people in class are going to get that, I think. I also, of course, do want you to know the major wine grapes associated with all of those major regions, but also any of the specific sub-regions we pointed out. Again, this is stuff from class, so I'm not going to repeat them all, but, you know, you should know what's in a poulet fumé or a Chablis or the main grapes grown in Bordeaux or the main grapes grown in the Rhone, or that particular acronym that we talked about, the major grapes down in southern France. All that stuff is fair game that I could pop up a label from any of those places mentioned in class and say, hey, what's in this bottle? Is this Syrah, or is this Grenache, or is this what's in a Burgundy? I don't know. I'm going to ask you on the labels exam. So you should know the major grapes for all the major sub-regions of France, but also any sub-regions that we identified by name. Gigondas versus a poulet faussé. You might be called upon to know some of that stuff. Having said that, you know what? We're going to broaden it up for the entire planet. And this is stuff that you're going to have to know for the final exam as well, for the big final exam. But it could pop up on the labels exam. And that is, go ahead and know those king grapes that we pointed out for each region, for each country, I should say. So Malbec is the king of Argentina. Tempranillo, the king of Spain. Nebbiolo, the king of the Piedmont region there in western Italy. So when you see things like Barolo, Barbaresco, you should probably know, oh yeah, that's a Nebbiolo grape. So know that list. It's going to help you on the final exam. It may be you may be called upon that for the labels exam as well. Now, what I'm going to do is, because we did not get to everything everywhere in class, I'm going to go through the Zereli text. This one? Kevin Zereli's Windows on the World Complete Wine Course. This is an awfully good book. I used to think it was kind of ragtag, and it is in a certain sense, but man, he's got some good information in here. It's pretty well organized. So I'm going to flip through, and I'll give you the page number in order to help you out with studying if you want reinforcement on some of those great names, region names, and some other things. Again, this is not all-inclusive. I'm flipping through this book to tell you things that aren't going to hurt you to know. Page 31, the white wines of France. It looks like they've got a nice little schemata up here on the top of that page right there that points out all of the major regions and the major grapes from those major regions. Boy, that couldn't hurt you to know that. Again, for the labels exam, but also for final exam. And again, I'm flipping through. It's not going to hurt you to look through the entire Israeli text and look at every single wine label. Just look at it and see if you can understand it, know a little bit about where it's from. But specifically, I also talked about Loire in some detail in class. Loire Valley on page 36. They have the major subregions, most of which that I pointed out in class, and the major varietals from them, including Sauvignon Blanc. Oh, the French do it so well. Remember that one from class, actually that region called Touraine, which is not even in here. I might ask you that just because I like people that come to class, and they should probably remember and know that. How do you spell Touraine? I don't know. Go ask somebody who's in class or go look it up. It's not in the Israeli text, but you might see the Touraine question pop up somewhere. And it's a subregion of Loire that does Sauvignon Blanc. On page 42 are the white wines of Burgundy with a nice little map. And we talked about Burgundy in class. The Côte d'Or, which is comprised of the Côte de Nuit and Côte de Beaune together, equals Côte d'Or. So yeah, and there's also Côte Chalonnaise, Maconnais, Beaujolais. You folks remember in class what's unique about Beaujolais red wines? If so, you'll get that question right. But also, what are the grapes grown, red and white, from any of those sub-regions of Burgundy? Oh, I'm sorry, including Chablis. So you have Chablis, the Côte de Nuit and Côte de Beaune that together are Côte d'Or, Côte Chalonnaise, Maconnais, and Beaujolais. What are the grapes grown there? Can you tell me about the stuff on the bottle there? Also, looking at label reading in terms of understanding the French systems, look at page 45. Look at 3 different labels of Chablis. A Chablis Village, a Chablis Premier Cru, a Chablis a Chablis Grand Cru. Can you look at those labels? And I'm looking down here. Might you see labels like that on an exam, and you'll have to determine which one's the more expensive one? Could be. That could happen. And that's a good example there for Chablis. Let me jump ahead. Oh, by the way, I will give you a little heads up. For most of the rest of the Frenchy chapters, I'm not gonna ask you specifics. Not like the ultra specifics that were on a lot of the quizzes from Zareli, because you could look the stuff up. It was open book. This, by the way, is not open book. So you are going to have to know the general rules. And gosh, what is the village wine versus a Grand Cru or Premier Cru? Yeah, I do expect you to know that. Okay, now for stuff that we didn't get to at all in class, and I see I'm already at 8 minutes, so I'm going to try to do this quickly. It is definitely going to be to your advantage to flip to page 100 and 101 and read about German wines. You can start on page 99 if you like. In fact, read page 99, 100, and actually that'll do. 99 and 100. I promise you, I will ask you about the German rating system in terms of the German system's different than the French and really the rest of the world in terms of they have geography in Germany. So they have the Rhone, this region or that region. They have the Rheingau, the Rhine-Hessen, the Falls. I will not ask you those on a test. I'm not that picky about, oh, well, what's different about a Mosel wine versus a Rheingau? The answer is there's not. So the German system is more important to understand the ripeness level at harvest of the grapes, not so much the specific geographic regions they're from. So read and know page 100. And it goes in order of sweetness. And by the way, this typically means, as we go up this scale of sweetness, it typically means that the finished wine is sweeter and sweeter, sweeter and sweeter. It doesn't necessarily have to be that way. What I mean by that is, the outline on page 100 is telling you German wines in terms of how sweet the grapes are when they're harvested. You know this, I hope, by now in class, that no matter how sweet the grapes are when the vineyardist or winemaker harvests them, the winemaker can make a dry wine or a sweet wine. It's depending upon the winemaker. and how long it lets the fermentation go. But in general, German wines are based on levels of sweetness at harvest, and that usually 99% of the time equates to how sweet they are, even the finished wine. I'm always going to mention them in order from top to bottom so you can see how to pronounce them, and I'm going to let you read what these things mean. Cabinet's base level of average ripeness at harvest, so they make us a wine that, it's wine. It'll probably have a semi-sweet taste to most American palates, but it's just a hint of sweetness. The next level up is Spätlese. That means later harvest. They've allowed the berries to stay on the vine a little bit longer, get a little bit more accumulated sugar. And again, I'm not going to read off all the definitions. The next tier up is Auslese, Beerenauslese, Trockenbeerenauslese. And all of those words going up, you see the root word is Auslese, then Beerenauslese, then Trockenbeerenauslese. Auslese means outpicked. They are rich, sweet, concentrated berries at that point that usually translate into a pretty darn full-on sweet wine by American standards. We'd be like, wow, this is sweet. And then Beerenauslese is even sweeter. And then Trockenbeerenauslese is even sweeter. Trockenbeerenauslese. Trocken means dry in German, actually. Trockenbeeren, dried berries. Yes, they've basically allowed them to turn into raisins and concentrate the syrupy sugar inside of them. Dry berry. Trockenbeerenauslese. There's also a top upper tier called Eiswein that we've talked about in class, and that's when they allow the grapes to actually freeze on the vine, and thus concentrating, when they squeeze them, thus concentrating the syrup, the concentrated sugar sweet syrup that comes out. So that's the tier levels of German wine. By harvest, you will always see one of those words on the label of a German wine. And yes, I will probably ask you or show you some labels on the exam and say, hey, which one of these do you think is sweeter? Yeah, I'm just that crazy. You know what? I'll give you an additional one too. Oh, by the way, you can see some of those grape labels. I'm sorry, those wine labels from Germany on page 106 and 107 of the Israeli text. Look for those words. All the German labels that you see, go float around the web and look for others and see if you can find others and look for those words. They should be, one of those words should be on all of the exported wine out of Germany. The ones they drink locally, they don't necessarily label that way. But almost all the ones you'll see in America will have one of those words on it. It's the top tier level of German wine. One other question I definitely will give you that's not anywhere, this is just for those that want to watch this video, is if you see the word Halbtrocken on a bottle of German wine, Halb, H-A-L-B, Trocken, T-R-O-C-K-E-N, Halbtrocken. Trocken, I've now told you, means dry. Trockenbeerenauslese is dried berries outpicked. But Halbtrocken means half dry, and that's actually talking about the taste of the finished wine. So if you see the words Halbtrocken on a German label, it's saying this is a half dry. So yeah, it doesn't even matter what sweetness level it was harvested at. This is something closer to dry than it is to sweet. Halbtrocken. Okay. Jumping to page 113. 112, 113. The red wines of Burgundy. Again, I've mostly talked about these in class, and I've mentioned them already a little bit with the white wines of Burgundy. So Côte d'Or equals Côte de Nuit and Côte de Beaune. We've already talked about that. The other major sub-regions, the grapes that they grow there, should be no surprise at this point to you, I hope. With that exception, down in Beaujolais, do know that. And yeah, you might see, I might throw on a tricky one like from page 120 when we are looking at the price levels of Burgundy wine. So you see 3 different labels from the same vineyard there on page 120, and one of them is a village wine, one of them is a village with and vineyard named wine, and one is just a Grand Cru named for the vineyard. Gosh, I wonder which one's most expensive. Yeah, I might ask you something like that. Will I show you those exact labels? Maybe, but maybe not. But you would have to be able to differentiate them. So do take a look at those and make sure you understand how they are labeled so that you understand what it is they're trying to tell you. On page 123, the Rhone Valley. I did just barely touch upon this in class, and I told you a few tips of things to know, like Northern Rhone versus Southern Rhone. You know what? I'm not gonna lie. I really probably won't ask you a question about Côte Rôtie, Crozet, Hermitage, or Hermitage. These are small regions up in Northern Rhone that specialize in Syrah, but you won't see them that much. They're awfully expensive wines. I will ask you something about Châteauneuf-du-Pape, or Tavel, or Gigondas. Stuff we talked about in class. Gosh, what are in those, I wonder? What's up with that Tavel? What's up with that Tavel wine? What's up with Châteauneuf-du-Pape? What grapes are in there? What do they do? What do they like? I don't know. Go look at your class notes. 136. Another possible test question might be about the pricing structure of Bordeaux's. So top of one, page 36, I actually showed you that in class. Check out those labels and understand the breakdown of how the Bordeaux folks do it in terms of a proprietary wine versus their AOC subregion versus their Chateau label. I will not ask you anything more complicated about Bordeaux. Sorry. I should be tricky and lie and make you learn all this stuff, but there's just too much detail. It's of no huge value to you when it comes to Bordeaux wines. Too much hype. I love Bordeaux wines, but too much hype. Okay, now for the rest of the book, is it the rest of the book? For most of the rest of the book, it gets into the reds and whites of the rest of the world, the New World. We had our awesome friend Scott Drake come to class and tell us a little bit about the great wines of Argentina and Chile. He did a great job. Oh, that's fair game, even for the label exam, quite frankly. But I do know this for now, that the New World wines are really easy to understand from a labeling perspective, which is why I don't even feel that guilty we didn't get to it in class. You know this already from multiple lectures about multiple topics, that the New Worlders, and we're talking about the Americas, Australia, South Africa, really everybody else outside of Europe, they focus on varietal wines. So they mostly label by varieties of grape. And so it's like, yeah, it's Argentinian wine, it's Malbec. Yeah, it's California wine, Zinfandel. That's how they do it. The geography takes a back seat to the grape variety, and so that's all you really need to know. With everything else with New World wines is you have to know the producer, because the region may not tell you that much. We know that California makes some big reds, so you should know the king grapes. California's king at Cab, king at Zinfandel, actually Petit Syrah and some others. Australia's king with Syrah. New Zealand's also with Sauvignon Blanc. So there are countries and even sub-regions within those countries that do certain grapes really well, and that's all you really need to know. For the rest of your lives, if you really want to know what's a good Syrah from Australia, now you just have to start learning producers. These guys make it this way. I like that label. Okay. All of them are going to tell you it's from Australia and it's a Shiraz. After that, it's up to you to find out more. But for labeling and for understanding labels, it's the New World's simple. I just summed it all up. So know the big boy grapes for every major country that they specialize in. Oh, wait a minute, I totally forgot to do this in class. With one exception, the New World exception I want you to know, mostly because I want you to try them, are Meritage wines. And this is on page 160 of your Sorelli text. Meritage, I don't know if I can zoom into that section. There it is. What are Meritage wines? I want you to know what Meritage wines are, and I might show you a label on that for their label exam, because they're blended wines. Even though I've now told you most New Worlders focus on the grape, which is true, a lot of folks in other parts of the world say, hey, but we like blended wines too, and hey, we really like Bordeaux. So what I want you to know is that Meritage, if you see that name, Meritage, from California, or actually Australia or anywhere else, it means that they are doing a Bordeaux blend. So put it in your brain, Meritage equals Bordeaux blend. They can't call it Bordeaux, they're from California. They'll call it Meritage though. And I think it's even like a copyrighted or trademark name. And you have to follow the rules of Meritage in order to name it Meritage, I think. I'm not swearing to that, it doesn't matter. I just want you to know that if you see the word Meritage and no other description on the label, it's a Bordeaux-style wine, so it's probably heavy Merlot and Cabernet Sauvignon with maybe Cabernet Franc and a few other grapes thrown in there, trying to duplicate those great wines of Bordeaux. Meritage. Actually, it's Meritage. Rhymes with heritage, so Meritage. Meritage. Wines of Spain, we did not talk about at all in class, but if you like, you know what, I'll just tell you if you like it or not. since this is a mini wine label lecture, I will expect you to know the major grapes of just a couple of the major ones from Spain. Namely, do know that Tempranillo is the king of the red grapes from Spain. They also grow a lot of Grenache and Mouvedre or Monastrell. But the major region that I will ask you a question about is, and by the way, this is on page 171, major grape varietals planted in Spain, and page 170 has got the major big wine regions of Spain. The main ones that you probably should know about if you're really getting into wine are Ribera del Duero, Rioja, and actually I say Rioja-Biaches. It's that one, for those of you that came to that talk that Chuck Hussey did, we talked about Rioja-Biaches, the one that's way up there in northwestern Spain on the border with Portugal. It's actually a really cooler climate that grows a lot of great white wines, like Albarino and Verdejo and a few others. So what I want you to know is Rioja, Tempranillo. I think it's the main component of Ribera del Duero as well. And for some label questions, Rioja wines are actually pretty easy to understand. Read pages 172, 173 very quickly. And by read, I mean it's like 2 paragraphs. And I will, just to see how many people actually watch this video who are dedicated enough to want to learn more and score well on this exam. Top of 170, I was in the middle of 173 are 3 different labels. Ding, 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 from Rioja. And they are labeled by years that they have been aged. So Crianza label means it's been aged at least 2 years in oak barrels. A Reserva, at least 3 years. A Gran Reserva, 5 to 7 years of aging. So I might ask you, hey, which one of these has spent most time in a barrel? Wow, what an impossible question, unless you actually just listen to what I said. In which case it's simple. I also did not get to Italian wines at all, and I increasingly don't even feel guilty about that, because Italian wines they're such a mess, and they're a beautiful mess. Che bella, they're a beautiful mess. In terms of, they grow everything now, and they're experimenting everywhere, and they have the same type of labeling system and AOC system as France, but only half the people pay attention to it. And there's Italian wines that give you a bunch of information. There's Italian wines that put the word buongiorno on the label, and that's it. That's it. And you're like, I don't want. Dude, Italian wines are so frustrating and so magnificent. And so that's why I don't even do that much about them in class, because they're more confusing than liberating if you try to study them systematically, because the Italians don't do anything systematically, including making and labeling of their wines. But they make great wines. But I will ask you a few things, and I'll tell you the few things I'm going to ask you right now. The few things I'll ask you are that the grape of Tuscany, central Italy, Tuscany, is a Sangiovese. This is stuff that maybe we have talked about in other lectures. Sangiovese is the great grape of Tuscany, and particularly of Chianti. These are places that you are familiar with. That's why I wanted to make sure you understood them. And if you've ever had a Chianti, you know they're kind of they're red wines, but on the kind of acidic, thinner side. It's because of that particular grape and the way that they're made. So Chianti, Chianti Classico, Chianti Classico Reserva. Do read about that on page 180. And most Chiantis, it's not 100% Sangiovese, but it's the major base. So Sangiovese is the king of Tuscany, the king of Chianti. Other regions, for those of you that get really rich and want to try really expensive wines, you go to Brunello di Montalcino, a little further south, or Vino Noble di Montalcino, and they all grow clones of Sangiovese, and they're 100% Sangioveses, but really expensive wines. The other, I don't want to say details, but I think it's important. The other major thing I want you to know for the exam for labels is the Piedmonts. So page 182 in the Israeli text. And the Piedmont, that's northwestern Italy, they're known pretty much just for 3 grapes, and one of them is the major one. That's Nebbiolo. Nebbiolo is the king, the titan. And if you see these really expensive wines called Barolo or Barbaresco, and there are 2 labels of that on page 183. In fact, there's a little box that says Barolo versus Barbaresco. Go ahead and read that as well. they're 100% Nebbiolo. Maybe I'll ask you that on the wine label exam. Boom, there you go. What's in this bottle? It's a Barolo or a Barbaresco. It's 100% Nebbiolo. Huge, big wine. Usually needs to be aged for 4 to 5 years before you even think about tasting it. Then you age it for 10 years after that. But because I want you to be drinking good wines that aren't necessarily expensive as hell, because Nebbiolos are expensive as hell, I want you to try some other ones from that area. Dolcetto and Barbera. Dolcetto and Barbera are two different grapes, red grapes, that make wines that are usually on the more fruit-forward side, although they can be made in lots of different ways. And the reason it's easy to understand them because they actually, in the Piedmont, mostly label by variety too when it comes to Dolcetto and Barbera, except they look like fancy words that throw people. And so Barbera, they'll be labeled as Barbera di Asti, or Barbera di Alba, or Dolcetto di Asti. And what they're saying is the Dolcetto of Asti. Asti's a town. The Barbera de Alba. Barbera of Alba. Alba's a town. So it's this of this. It's this grape of this place. Dolcetto di Alba. The one you probably already had that we talked about in class was Moscato di Asti. The Muscat of Asti. That slightly effervescent candied white wine that we talked about, the most perfect breakfast wine. So, Dolcetto di Alba, Barbera di Asti, Moscato di Asti. These are all wines from the Piedmont. And the big boys, the Nebbiolos, come from subregions called Barolo and Barbaresco. And again, for the people like, you're talking too fast, I can't read any of that, I can't get it. I'm telling you, page 182, 183. And they actually don't even have a really good map of Piedmont to show you the subregions of that, but that's okay. That's all I'll ask you about for Italy. I do have a note in here on page 197 to remind you that we also talked about levels of champagne residual sugar. And so if you missed class, you can read through 196, 197. If you were in class, be sure to know the sweetness levels of your champagne and how they label them. That's all. I'll ask you that on the test. Flipping to pages 222, 227. Just a note from Australia and New Zealand to know the king grapes from there. And again, the label reading is easy because they'll say it's Sauvignon Blanc from New Zealand, and that's what New Zealand's famous for. Although they are increasingly making a lot of Pinot Noir. Some people really like Pinot Noir from New Zealand. Myself, not a fan. And you already know that Australia, of course, they do a lot of everything, quite frankly, but it's a big hot climate, and Shiraz is their king grape, but they make lots of big Cabs, lots of big Merlots, lots of big everything. To finish, you could flip to page 238 and 242. 238 and 242. There's just a couple pages on the wines of Chile and the wines of Argentina. Again, this is supposed to be about the label exam, but it's all of this could be questions I could weave into label interpretation. If you came to the talk that our friend Scott Drake gave, then you probably already got all this stuff. And you know that Malbec is the king of Argentina, and Torrontés is the big white grape of Argentina. And in Chile, they do a lot of kind of the classic European varieties. They do Sauvignon Blanc, Chardonnay, Cab, Merlot. But the one that would be kind of a wild card is that one called Carmenere. For those of you that remember that from the talk, Carmenere, you don't really see outside of Chile, and they are trying to make it in. They're trying to sell it as the Malbec of Chile, but it's not quite, frankly, that big of a grape. It doesn't make it into that big Titanic of a wine like many Malbecs out of Argentina. And that's pretty much it. So you know the kind of, it's going to be France heavy, I won't lie. We spent a lot of class time on that. All the class notes are par for the course for the labels exam, particularly those sub-regions and their specialties. But we've also thrown in a few stylistic variations from around the world. Know the major grapes from the major countries, major regions like California, let's say, or Australia or South Africa. And I just now have gone through and pointed out some specifics of things you'll see on there. There'll probably only be 25 to 35 questions, all visual on screen. You will have to actually sign up to take this test, because if we have more than 250 people trying to take the exam, we'll actually split you into 2 different groups. But that will remain to be seen. I have no idea how many people are actually going to take this test. I'm going to send out an email about this, but if you've made it this far into this 30-minute wine label review, then you can get ahead of the curve and go on to Scholars, onto the Scholar system for the wine class, and go to Sign Ups. And you will have to sign up for the wine label exam and also sign up for the final exam. That way I know how many people are coming, how to prepare, how many tests to print off, stuff like that. So it is going to be mandatory that if you are planning to take these tests, to go ahead and sign up for them. But I will send you an email about that as well. Just help it all, I hope, a little bit. Against 30 minutes, kind of ran through a whole bunch of information, but I cited the page numbers, I believe, as best of my ability. So you can flip through that, flip through your course notes, and you should be fine. You should be able to ace it. For those that are just desperate for points, who have never come to class and didn't really want to do even the Israeli quizzes, I will not lie, this will be exceptionally challenging. You have a hell ton to learn in the next 4 days, but I guess you can pull it off. I've done my best to outline things. But it's a lot of info that if you have no experience with, you'll be starting from ground zero to try to build up to. Good luck and happy drinking, and we'll see you in class on Tuesday for those hardcore folks that still show up. Otherwise, we'll see a whole bunch more of you on Thursday that I've not seen probably for months, and you'll do your best to get through those exams. All right, cool, excellent, party on.